delighted to have on stage with me today, in particular, Lynn Ulbricht. If you were here this morning, you would have heard Nick Gillespie mention that Lynn is the mother of Ross Ulbricht. Ross Ulbricht was charged with creating the Silk Road website. As Nick explained, the Silk Road website, it was a peaceful way to buy and sell drugs that the government has made illegal. And it was very successful in making it safer for users. I mean, my personal opinion is that the war on drugs is actually a war on people. They don't actually care about the drug use, they just want to punish people who use, and I think that that is so unjust. And just to give you a bit of background, I do want Lynn to really talk about what's going on with the case with her son. To give you some background, who here has heard of Silk Road knows about it and knows what's happened? Okay, so a lot of you have. Basically, what happened was Ross was charged and he was never actually given a free trial. And that's really devastating. And on top of that, he was completely smeared by the media who said he did things that he was never actually charged with. There were witnesses for the defense who were blocked. There were corrupt agents involved in the case who later went to jail for fraud. And the jury was not allowed to know about them while this trial was going on. So it was just this, I mean, it was a total sham trial, in my opinion. But I'm going to, first of all, just, I'll introduce you all individually as we get to, but Lynn, I just want to start off with you. Can you give us an overview of where the case is at?
Yeah, well, right now, Ross's appeal was denied, and we are petitioning for a rehearing, and then if that doesn't work, the next step in the system is to petition the Supreme Court. I feel like it's very important for everyone to realize that the reason my son has been sentenced to die in a cage is for an idea. It's for a platform. A platform that allowed voluntary, free market interaction among individuals that was beyond the reach of the government. They say it's only about drugs. Only drugs were allowed to be mentioned in the trial. But the other drug offenders in the Silk Road case, the biggest drug dealer on Silk Road got 10 years. And it goes down from there. I believe that Ross...
How many years did your son get?
He got double life plus 40 years without parole. There's no parole in the federal system. It's essentially a slow death sentence.
And to confirm, Lynn, he didn't actually deal any of the drugs. He just built a website.
Yeah. So, this is... The idea is a bigger threat to the government than drugs. And the judge herself, at sentencing, said, we know you created this based on philosophy, and we're just not sure that's a philosophy you've left behind. So we've got to put you in a cage for the rest of your life to make sure that dangerous philosophy of voluntary interaction and free market exchanges is not released to the danger of society. This should concern us all. Scott Greenfield, who's a very experienced criminal defense attorney, said in his blog, the reason Ross got such a harsh sentence was for having the hubris of creating a virtual agora beyond the reach of the government. Now, this, of course, used an alternative currency, so that was an alternative system, Bitcoin, which Chuck Schumer, who was on the Senate Finance Committee, obviously didn't like. He's the one that started this whole investigation into Silk Road. It also used an alternative communication system, Tor, which was beyond the surveillance abilities of the government. The government has said in their papers in this case, anyone who uses Tor has criminal intent. So that, I guess, they include dissidents, political dissidents, and journalists, and anyone who wants privacy. We all have criminal intent. This is not unique to the dark web. I just want to quickly say, I spoke in Prague a little over a year ago to a group called Parallel Polis, who is based on the philosophy of Václav Benda, who's a Czech dissident, who created a parallel system to circumvent the repression of the communist regime in the 70s in Czechoslovakia. So this is something that when the government becomes too totalitarian, too corrupt, that people naturally do create alternative systems to get around. And it's the ultimate threat because it renders the government irrelevant. Unfortunately, my very idealistic, libertarian 26-year-old son, when he came up with this bright idea, did not understand the brutal and relentless forces that he was coming up against. And now he is sitting in a maximum security prison with violent people. Ross has no violent charges, nothing violent in his history whatsoever. He's very peaceful, very nice person. He's paying that price for being naive and not realizing that this is the ultimate threat to government.
And people can write to Ross so they can send him books, is that correct?
Yes, we have a website, freeross.org, where you can communicate with me, where you can find out how to write Ross, and find out a lot more about the case. I also have handouts that talk a little bit about it, but the website has lots of details.
And you're taking this case to the Second Circuit?
Right now, we're reappealing. You reappeal and they turn you down. It's the system, right? And then after that, if they do turn us down, we are prepared to go to petition the Supreme Court.
And one thing that's really important about this case is that it sets a lot of precedents going forward for how people can be charged. So Amazon should now be able to be charged for things that are sold on their website. I know that eBay sells a lot of counterfeit goods. Currently, they're not liable for those goods, and yet somehow Ross was liable for Silk Road. So this really does set up precedents. It also sets up precedents about how they gather evidence, because they never actually disclosed in a reasonable manner how they found the server. So, I mean, it's just a whole lot of privacy issues that hinge on this case as well. But I know that they're still raising money because they're still fighting this and trying to revoke those precedents. So if you do want to donate, go to freeross.org, and it's much appreciated. It's just a really important case. So Carla, you're involved with the Free State Project, which is another great way of circumventing the state. You basically set up this utopia, and I've been to the Free State Project. I've been to the Pork Fest, which is the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and it was wonderful. And there's a lot of support there, obviously, for Ross. It's all the same ideals. They believe in freedom. Tell us about the project and tell us about what you're doing at the moment.
Sure. So the Free State Project is, in some ways, the geographic manifestation of Silk Road. We are 20,000 people strong. 20,000 people have pledged to move to the state of New Hampshire over the next 5 years. And of the people who've already moved, we have a very, very vibrant Bitcoin community. The first Bitcoin ATM in the world was developed in New Hampshire, Lawsuit. We have legislation that is now coming out in support of more Bitcoin deregulation. In fact, Senator Sununu just signed a bill saying that if you're a Bitcoin trader or a cryptocurrency trader in New Hampshire, you would not be subjected to the money lender standards. So that was a big deal. So basically what we're trying to do is to attract as many dynamic people to the state of New Hampshire so that we can create one libertarian state, so that we can show that these ideas truly work. So we work on sort of free market principles. I would say generally you can kind of divide free staters into three groups. You have people who work within the system. There's a great organization called the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance that works on sort of all the ratings and the bills and stuff. We also have a lot of civil disobedience. I think that there's a real overlap there, sort of keeping with the theme of this talk on Walden Pond with Thoreau, those ideas of self-reliance, the idea of sort of escaping to beautiful nature. New Hampshire, of course, is an incredibly attractive state. In fact, on Wire Mises last year, there was a report written that said if New Hampshire was an independent country, it kind of looked at all the states in America and compared it to different countries across the world. And New Hampshire beat Luxembourg, Norway, and Switzerland, and was defined as the wealthiest state per capita in the world. So what we are hoping to do is to kind of create this stronghold to show everyone else these ideas work. I'm actually currently no longer the president. I had a checklist of things I wanted to do, which included triggering the move and getting Edward Snowden, and then getting Edward to talk about Ross. Those were my goals. I met them. So I retired.
You said, by the way, it was unthinkable that the NSA was not involved in the investigation into the Silk Road.
Yes, actually that was something that Edward Snowden did say during that talk. And currently involved with the New Hampshire Foundation for Independence. The word independence, of course, is the nice palatable term for the S word that we're not allowed to say. So, you know, the idea there is to create an anchor to say this would be the primary end goal. Not all free staters, of course, but I do believe that if we can create a truly independent state, then things start to get really interesting. Maybe you give, you know, immunity to Edward Snowden to come back to the States. Maybe we figure out some kind of exchange that we could bring Ross to New Hampshire. So, you know, that's the long-term goals, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone afterwards if you have more questions about specifically what we're doing in New Hampshire.
Sounds wonderful. As I said, I've been to visit, I've been to Porkfest, which is sort of giving people a taste of what it's like to live in New Hampshire, hoping that they'll stay or decide to move there one day. And I'm definitely considering it. I have to tell you that. And every time, you know, like New York is just so regulation riddled, and every time I think about that, I'm just like, one step closer to moving to New Hampshire. One day.
I love hearing that, and of course it's, you know, it's cheaper in there. I bought a fabulous house for under $250,000 that would have cost me, you know, over $1 million in San Francisco.
That is beautiful.
You're banned for your buck and you're banned for your Bitcoin.
So next we have singer-songwriter Tatiana Rose. She's also very prominent in the Bitcoin sphere. Tatiana, tell us about circumventing the government using cryptocurrency and, you know, how that relates to you and the arts.
Well, I've always been very inspired by the arts. They've driven my sort of political evolution. And in 2012, I was quite disappointed when Ron Paul didn't win the nomination. And around that time, I became introduced to Bitcoin. And what I loved about it was that it allowed me to talk about the ideas of liberty without the labels of Republican or Democrat. And that was something that I struggled with in the arts as well, because you know, music has become very homogenous in terms of the ideology that's permitted. And how are we going to inspire future generations if they're only hearing things through sort of a socialist lens, and that's the only acceptable form of dissent? Right now, we just don't hear any anti-war songs. So Bitcoin was a way for me to teach people. You know, I got involved, I created a Bitcoin jingle, and then I wanted to solve some of the problems that I saw in the music industry, namely with access to fans and funding. How do we make sure that we're actually connecting directly with people, and cryptocurrency allows for that. It takes out the intermediary. And with Tatiana Coin, I've even allowed for them to fund me directly and to be a part of my success. So I think that's part of the steps that we need to take. My album, on the album I have a song called The Silk Road, and I wrote it about Ross, and it was inspired, of course, by him and Lynn's journey as well. It really made that, you know, when you hear about the prison system, you think, oh, well, that just is something that's sort of distant. But if you can relate it to a matter of the heart, and you can make people feel something when they hear a song, then I think that sometimes that can be a little bit more powerful than just giving them a presentation or seeing a story on the news. I think the story part is really what makes people connect. As I grew closer to Ross, you know, he, for my birthday, decided to draw a picture of me, and I decided to use it as the album cover for my new record. And the reason why I did that was to underline that if I was signed to a major label, they wouldn't permit me to have a political prisoner, you know, artwork on the cover. And I think it's important to use the arts to drive ideas home and to sort of give people an alternative and hopefully engage with them emotionally before necessarily driving home some of the harder hitting facts. I think that that's part of the thing that got me involved, and that's how I hope to influence others. Bitcoin itself is the great communicator, it is the great connector, and I think it can have a much bigger impact than some of the political routes.
Right. Jeffrey Tucker, so you've been involved really closely with Lynn and through this whole trial, and you're actually the reason I first got in contact with Lynn Ulbricht and learned all about this case. I mean, how does it make you feel to see the government not being held accountable, not giving people fair trials, and what recourse do we have when they do that?
Well, I feel obviously, you know, very intense emotion about the Ross case. You know, because his innovation, it was not just brilliant. What he did really was a kind of hinge of history. And, in a just world, he would be celebrated as one of the great innovators of our times. And it just sickens me deeply, at every level that we're facing what we're facing with him today. And a deep and terrible tragedy, horrible human cost, and yet the platform, the kind of platform he innovated, a digital space that allows for free commercial activity, that continues on. His dream is being realized at levels which I don't think that in those days he could have ever imagined. I wish he were here with us now to celebrate. And yet he's here in spirit. And he knows that we're here for him. One of the things that happened since this conference began is that we've experienced the most significant change in the blockchain protocol since its inception in 2009. Very significant. A new layer is being added to the blockchain called SegWit that will permit many of the extraneous information aside from just token processing on the chain to be off-chain, which frees up a lot of space on the blockchain. It's going to speed up transactions, lower miners' fees, and make it cheaper. In other words, it allows the blockchain to do what it's supposed to do. But what I found most fascinating about this, and if you're wondering why, the price of the dollar Bitcoin exchange ratio is now once again approaching record highs, right? This is why. In the last 48 hours, the consensus was arrived to implement SegWit. It's technologically very interesting, fascinating from a theoretical point of view, but above all else, it shows the capacity of the community that's involved in building this parallel society, essentially. Its capacity for managing itself and dealing with problems and solving them. And so people are very happy about SegWit, no question. But even more exciting is to see the way the community came together, solved its problems, and announced this protocol. It'll be implemented sometime in the next few weeks, I suppose. It gives me a lot of faith. And it's amazing. You look at the blockchain world and its self-managing structures, and its the peace and voluntarism, and its capacity for unleashing human creativity and realizing the dreams of all people, and you compare that with today's conventional politics, which has become a deeply dangerous threat to human rights all over the world. I mean, this works, this doesn't. It's very clear to me.
Thank you. So, another Jeff, not Jeff Tucker, Jeff Burley. You also want to talk about how cryptocurrencies can circumvent and even destroy the state. I mean, we've talked about Bitcoin already many times at Freedom Fest. We've talked about power and technological advancement, but this is also a tool for freedom. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I always find it weird to have a freedom conference in the U.S., one of the least free places in the world. It's very strange, but I've actually met a lot of people at this conference, and not many of them seem to believe in freedom anyway, so actually most of the people that believe in freedom are up on the stage, the anarchists. Everyone else believes in oppressive authoritarian control and social.
Well, I disagree with that, but continue.
So it's just a little odd to be here, but nice to be here. Thank you very much. As far as cryptocurrencies, I think we have to realize that we live in the most tyrannical, oppressive time in human history at this moment in time, which is kind of odd and interesting and funny, because at the same time we also have a free market providing us all kinds of amazing things which makes our lives so much better. If we didn't have that, it'd be absolutely horrible. You know, we just have to realize we live in absolute tyranny right now. It's never been worse. You feel like 100 years ago, you didn't need passports to travel. Right? Forget about what you need just to do anything, especially here in the U.S., one of the least free countries in the world now. You just can't do anything here without the government, the bureaucrats, put their stamps on it and charging you a fee, a fine, a regulation, a tax, just massive amounts of taxes. So the reason cryptocurrencies are so important is because, of course, the root of all of this, the control, the power structure is money. It was Rothschild who said a few hundred years ago that I care not what puppet sits on the throne of England. All I care is who controls the money, and I control the money. That's the Rothschild central banking system, which is basically behind every central bank in the world, except for in a few countries now. And there wasn't one in Syria, there wasn't one in Libya, there wasn't one in Iraq, there wasn't one in Afghanistan. I don't know if anyone sees what might be going on here, but these are the most evil, dangerous people in the world. But they have their control because they control the money. Now they can't. Now there's cryptocurrency, and this gives the power of money back to the people. It was Barack Obama, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who did not have one day of peace his entire presidency, bombing men, women, and children all across the world. Trump now carries on that crown. I don't know why he hasn't won the Nobel Peace Prize yet for his bombing of Syria and other countries as well. Barack Obama said last year, when asked about essentially Bitcoin and cryptology, he said, well, this is a real problem when it comes to tax collection. And of course, tax collection, that just means extortion. That's all government is an extortion racket. There's no difference between mafia and government except for size. And he said, well, if we allow this to happen, and here's the thing, they don't need to allow it. They can't stop it. This is the beauty of it. We are going to win this one. This is going to be the best time in human history soon. They don't know how to stop it. They can't stop it. There's no way to stop it. And he said, well, if you allow this, then everyone will have a Swiss bank account in their pocket. Good. And actually, it's way better than the Swiss bank account. It's way more private. No one can seize it. So everyone out there, if you believe in freedom, you need to at least start understanding cryptocurrencies, because it'll be one of the main paths. If we're ever going to have anything close to freedom, and it seems so dark and desolate at this moment in time, but it usually seems that way right near the end. I expect to see Ross out in a couple of years. I expect the U.S. government to not even exist in a couple of years. I expect the U.S. dollar to not exist in a couple of years. And we'll have peace and prosperity like we've never known.
Broad predictions there. pretty strong. Well, I definitely agree with the Bitcoin prediction there. It really is tremendous revolution, financial revolution. I know we've been saying this a lot at this conference, but if you haven't at least explored it, then just investigate, just do some research and learn about it, because it's a game changer. It gives you back so much more financial privacy and financial freedom, which is so important, as Jeff was saying. Doug Casey, you're an investment expert, an expert in a lot of things actually. You're an anarchist. I mean, can you talk to us about your ideas for circumventing the state, any tips that you would give to people, and things that they could do in their life to help give them back, more freedom?
Well, to me, the great enemy of all free people in the world is the state. And it's not any one particular state. It's the concept of the state, the idea of the state itself. It's cancerous. And what I find disturbing is that all of the states in the world, and the states of the world cover the globe like a skin disease at this point. There's no place that you can run and hide. All of them, all over the world, are becoming more grasping and more powerful. All of them are. It's almost at the point you can't run and hide. I mean, even as late as the 1980s, I used to travel around the world on a World Service Authority passport, which was issued by a guy I knew named Gary Davis. He just printed up his own passport and said, look, very authentic. And I used them successfully in half a dozen countries, and unsuccessfully in another half a dozen countries. Now you can't use them anywhere. So the world is becoming much, much more repressive. in all regards. That's the bad news. But, and some more bad news is that it's an accelerating trend towards more repression. And probably, as we go into something that resembles World War III, it'll get even worse, because war is the health of the state. But after that, I think the nation state, which is the great enemy of all free people, or people who want to be free, is going to blow apart, and humanity is going to reorganize itself. What you're seeing now in Syria, where it's not even a country anymore. What you're seeing in Libya, they still show it on the map as being a certain geographical area. It's not. It's controlled by at least 2, 3, 4 different groups. This is happening all over Africa, all over the Middle East. It's starting happening all over the world. So it's all good news. And Bitcoin is part of it. And so there's cause for long-term optimism. My hobby is going around the world talking to third world governments, trying to speed the plan along. So, cause for pessimism, cause for optimism, both at the same time.
I'd like to just say quickly that Ross was very honored that Doug Casey dedicated his newest book to him, along with Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. And also that Ross wrote a blurb recommending the book. He was very frustrated because he had written a much more incisive blurb, and his lawyers were like, maybe you better not say that. So, but he loved the book and really grateful to them.
I'm a huge fan of Ross and Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. These are 3 of the great heroes of our age. I want to see them.
I think what's most inspiring is to see an individual go up against such a giant behemoth. I mean, it takes a huge amount of courage to do that. We know the force that's behind the US government. We know the strings that they can pull with other governments around the world. I mean, it is a really, really tough situation that they're putting themselves in, and they're doing that because they believe in the cause of freedom, and they're doing this to fight for all of you, and that sort of bravery, you don't come across it often, so it is really commendable. Lynn, I just want to go back to you. Now, you know a lot more about all of the precedents that this case has set, but also this case has been really unique, and it's been the opposite of unique. I mean, did anyone see the film What Happened in Vegas? Yeah, a few people. So what I loved about that film was it started out by saying that the police who were involved with these shootings that happened just immediately ran these smear campaigns, and it made it so difficult for anyone to be sympathetic to the victims who were killed by the police officers, because the entire narrative was dominated by ideas that, they were drug addicts and all this other information which was entirely incorrect. And I know that in Ross's case, we've seen a huge smear campaign gone against him, and the media is just regurgitating this government narrative. And that's been the hardest, the biggest obstacle to getting support for this case. Because if you were, I met Ross, if you were exactly as he is, this lovely, incredibly smart, driven, principled man, everyone's going to flock to his side, and that's dangerous for government. So instead, they throw mud all over his name. It's just really, it's been such a struggle for you. So I want you to talk to us about that struggle, but also about how important the case is in terms of the precedents that it sets.
Okay, yes, as far as the smearing, Ross, the government claims that Ross was engaged in murder for hire. However, they didn't bother to bring that to trial or give Ross a chance to defend against it or have a jury rule on it. They just talk about it. They've never prosecuted these allegations, either in Maryland, where there's an indictment that's been sitting there for over 3 years, or at trial in New York. And yet, the judge used it to amplify her life sentence. The appellate court used it to justify upholding this life sentence. And it's never been proven. And I'm like, why have trials? And actually, trials are becoming almost extinct in the United States. Most people plea because they can't get a fair trial in this country, which is very alarming. Puts us all in peril. Ross has told me categorically he's never done this. And it shows in his writings, in the whole philosophy of the site, very peaceful. His whole history, he has no history of violence at all, and no charges of violence either. So there's that, and I've been told by other people that the government does this, and much of the media is very happy to cooperate. As far as precedent, well, there's the precedent of using uncharged crimes to amplify sentences, which is very alarming, and it's been being done a lot, as I said. There's the precedent of vicarious liability, where a website host in this case, but other businesses can be held liable for what other people do on their site or their business. The government criminally indicted Federal Express for drug trafficking because people use FedEx to send illegal pharmaceuticals. I haven't heard of them indicting the U.S. Postal Service, by the way. That's another precedent. The use of digital evidence in a trial, almost all the evidence, there were no witnesses, no DNA, no solid evidence against Ross, that Ross hurt anyone in any way, that Ross even did the things they allege. It was digital. I've had expert after expert tell me, well, that's child's play to create digital evidence, or tamper with it. And in fact, post-trial, there has been discovered proof that there was evidence, portions of the evidence were deleted. So the jury did not see complete evidence. There's also proof that someone using the Dread Pirate Roberts handle, which Ross was supposedly the only one, logged into the Silk Road after Ross was in prison. There's all kinds of questions in this case, but it creates a very serious precedent that the government can literally just create evidence with a computer or maybe Photoshop. A mortgage company will not accept a screenshot of a bank statement because they know how easily faked it is. But Catherine Ford's court happily accepted and told the jury, you can rely on this digital evidence, these screenshots and chats. Very dangerous. And now it's precedent. As a high-profile case, precedent will trickle down to other cases and eventually become the way it is. There's many, actually very concerning precedent for a long time. But go to freeross.org and they're all there.
Yeah. Carl, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I'm curious actually what the value proposition of New Hampshire is, that we have this really active community of people. And I do the thought experiment, if Ross had been running Silk Road from New Hampshire, whether things might have turned out slightly differently. By way of example, when I was charged with wiretapping for filming police officers, and I took my case all the way to the Second Circuit and prevailed, and it was one of the first cases that categorically stated that, of course, you as a citizen have the right to film police officers in the execution of their duty. Now, part of the reason I could do that, not only because I have a legal background, but the minute I got arrested, there were 10 people who showed up at midnight at some small town in New Hampshire. They were filming, they were holding people accountable. There was, independent media that started writing about it from the moment it happened, which of course can help shape the narrative. So I really feel for Ross because, I always have that picture in my head when they sort of stormed the library. And it's like, if he had a larger community of true liberty activists to sort of try and push it. I mean, the minute I heard about the story and Lynn contacted me, I said, yes, come to our events, talk about this, let's spread the word.
The thing is, Chuck Schumer in the Southern District of New York made sure Ross was tried in New York. He was arrested in California. He's from Texas. He had nothing to do with New York. But the Southern District of New York has been called the other mafia. This is under Pre-Ferrara. They make sure that they get the cases they want. They wanted that one.
Right, and Doug, you mentioned that currently there doesn't seem to be anywhere for people to run and hide. It seems from what Carl is saying is that we shouldn't be running and hiding. We shouldn't be trying to create places that are outside of the jurisdiction. Maybe we should just be fighting back. Maybe we should be showing more support about cases that we think are important. Would you agree with that?
Look, your biggest risk today, I'm of the opinion, as many of you know, that we entered this huge financial hurricane in 2007, went through the leading edge in 2008 and 2009. We've been in the eye of this huge hurricane for some years, and we're now going into the trailing edge of the storm. It's going to be a catastrophe from many points of view. So your financial risks are huge, but I don't want to talk about that. Your big risk is political. So you've got to diversify yourself politically. I mean, I agree with everything you guys are saying. Still, it's good to have a plan B. So if things really get bad in this political entity of the U.S., there's someplace else where you can go. So I'm an advocate in diversifying yourself internationally. All of these governments all over the world are run by the same kind of people. The worst, the poorest, and the worst kind of people are the kind of people that are drawn into the government. The same kind of people that are drawn into the mafia. I mean, they're all criminals. Criminal personalities go into government. They're all bad everywhere. But that's the world we live in, so you better have an escape hatch. So if this one really dislikes you, go to another one. You'll be safe for the time being. The Jews should have learned that lesson in Germany in the 1930s and many other countries around the world. And that's my solution today. And the internet is making it possible to identify with other people that share your values. So you can go to a weird, oddball country like Argentina and find other people that think exactly the way you do, which is important.
Jeffrey Tucker, you're involved with a lot of the movements. I know that you definitely know a lot about them. I mean, there's seasteading, there's trips to Mars, there's all of this, and I know that you mentioned, you talked about Australia or New Zealand. Where would you go? What's your plan B?
Here's what it's going to come down, just in the future, and I mean within the next 10 years. There's been a growing tendency, you've seen it in American cities, you've seen it in many places in the world. Governments are out of money and they're out of ideas. And they're, not able to do anything that they really want to do. They don't want to pay for police anymore. They're tired of trying to keep up these roads. It's not working anymore. In Atlanta, they sold off 2 square miles of the core of the city to private investors, right? Because they were glad to get rid of it. They said, we can't provide you with police. And the private investors said, that's great, awesome. We can't build you roads. Build you roads, fine, take care of that too. So, it was privatization. That model is going to take off around the world. It's going to go like this. So, we now have new methods of raising capital through crypto assets. In the future, in the very near future, we're going to start seeing these initial coin offerings, ICOs, designed to raise money to purchase plots of land around the world. And there's going to be so much money to be raised through these markets, through these crypto markets, that the owners of these assets are going to be able to purchase sovereign rights in Latin America, Far East, and many other places around the world. Just simply by agreeing to pay off government debt, for example, is a very marketable thing. And the markets are so lucrative that this is what's going to happen. So you're going to start seeing governments, essentially the state is going to sell off parts of itself in the future. Because the amount of wealth that's going to be unleashed in these crypto asset markets is unfathomably huge. If you just forecast out over the next 5 or 10 years how much money is going to become available, these crypto markets are going to be able to purchase bankrupt states, essentially. And we're going to have new options, new places to live. This is a new model. But it seems very viable and very practical, and I think we're going to see these come online in the very, very near future.
Right. And you actually...
If there's anything about that you didn't understand, you're welcome to ask.
Right. Yeah. You also wrote a book that provides day-to-day things that people could do to get around the nanny state. I mean, the government increasingly makes decisions about our lives.
It's really important to find little practical ways in your life to be a rebel. I really believe in that. You know, we too often accept the status quo that we're given. The model that the state wants us to live is not really good for us. It's not good for our lives, you know. And I do all kinds of symbolic things in my life to remind myself that I'm free. I always hack my shower heads. I never recycle. You know, these seem like small things. You know, I mix my own laundry detergent because the crap that they make us buy at the store doesn't work. I'm always hacking my water heaters and so on. Look, you know, it does make a difference in your life. But I think the symbolic value is to remind ourselves that we are meant to be free. We have human rights, and we should live as freely as we possibly can. Sometimes it takes creativity, trying new alternatives, being daring and rebellious in your own life. You can't give that up. You've got to. That's the basis of freedom itself. That's how we build an infrastructure of freedom for the future.
Stage here, you are a bunch of rebels, and inspiring rebels too. You know, you are role models for a lot of people to say, yeah, we're doing it. We're finding ways to provide freedom in our own lives. And I think that's super. I mean, Jeff, you run Anarcho-Coolco, Tatiana, all of your work in music. Actually, Tatiana, because of your work in creating your own coin, you're also a spokesperson, you're in the arts, you're a great person to talk to people. How do they spread the messages of liberty? How do they encourage people and let people know there are role models like this that they can learn from? Sorry, how best way to spread messages of liberty that you found?
For me, it's certainly in music, but also in other kinds of art. You know, when I was a little girl, my mother, she played Cat Stevens for me when we were driving the car, and there was this one moment where I was listening to Peace Train, and it, you know, it was like the light bulb went off, and I realized, wow, you could use this emotion to convey an idea, and that really set me on the trajectory that I'm on right now. So when I make a song about Silk Road or about, you know, with anti-war themes, or a song like Make a YouTube video where I encourage people to sort of engage with one another, I hope that I can be that spark for people, and that's what we need in our artistic culture right now. You know, we've been at war for how long, and how many anti-war songs have you heard on the radio compared to what was going on in the 60s and 70s? I don't think it's a coincidence that we don't have that anymore. I think that the government were frightened by the revolution started by those kinds of art forms, and they should be afraid. And I'm glad to be a part of the second wave, or another wave, I guess, throughout history that's been sort of doing the pushback through the arts.
Yeah, and I think more people need to be like you, honestly. More people need to be brave. I think that music industry in particular, it's just been dumbed down, and people are not being brave, and people are having, you know, they're not writing songs from the heart like you do, and they're not writing about important issues, and I'm not going to be someone to dictate what people should write about, but I am concerned that there aren't more people who are writing about important issues, and so you're doing great work in that as well. Sorry, Lynn, you wanted to jump in.
I just have a quick comment about that, because someone said to me before I came up here, she said, I'm afraid to go to your website. This is what it's come to in our country, that people are afraid of the government, and this is very, very concerning. If we're afraid of them, and we're afraid to do anything, they've already won. We might as well just all go to the gulag now. So it's a terrible thing that people are afraid of them, but it also speaks to the place we are in history. We're at a tipping point in history. I really believe that. And it's going to go one way or the other. And we've got to decide, are we going to go the way of the government intrusion and control and oppression, and basically dark ages, or are we going to go the way of liberty, innovation, freedom? We have to decide.
You were going to jump in, Carla.
Well, I thought this might be a good opportunity to plug my upcoming book. Because you were talking about the arts. I'm working on a memoir about the Free State Project. It should be out next year. It's called Chill, Don't Kill. So check it out when it comes out. Thanks.
Yeah, we've only got just a minute left. Jeff, did you want to talk to us about Anarchast and the things that you're involved with?
I can, or I can say more stuff about how bad the government is. Yeah, so we run Anarchast, which is the world's largest voluntarist conference now. We have over 500 last year, but it's going to be over 1,000 probably this year coming up. So people believe in true freedom, absolute, total freedom. And you mentioned that we're rebels. I don't see us as rebels. I see us as normal people. I don't know what's wrong with everyone else. Really. I don't know why they would like to be slaves so much. Well, actually, I kind of know why. Because the governments have had them in their 12 years of government indoctrination camps, putting fluoride in their water, vaccinating little babies without their immune systems even being started, with 30 different vaccines full of mercury. This is a genocidal program that most people don't seem to notice, don't seem to care. They don't seem to mind that they're slaves. The U.S. apparently, if you believe history, which I don't believe anything anymore after whatever you're told in school is all wrong, but apparently they started this country over a 2% tax on tea. Now they have a 50% tax on everything you make, and a tax on the hotel, and a tax on the food. You need to apply for a permit to cut here, and no one seems to mind.
The taxes are better in New Hampshire, so we can all eventually get there. We have to end there because we've run out of time, but thank you so much. As I said, you're all inspirational, you're all doing great things. Just thank you.